Okay, so here we go with part 2, social psychology. We're on page 650 to 657. Here we go. This is a little bit about conformity. So, conformity is when we adjust our thinking or behavior to match some other standard, some group standard. So we change the way we think, that we change what we do to match something else, the group. And so this is a very, very common, and it's a very powerful influencer for how we live and how our behavior is affected. I'm going to talk about a couple of different types of this. I'll give you a couple examples here today. But conformity is just this general idea that we change our thinking or our behavior, right? Thinking or behavior to match a group. An interesting thing is right here, the chameleon effect. The chameleon effect is when we mimic other people's the way they talk, or the way they hold their body, they gesture, or sometimes we even mimic like the way they look, they smile, we mimic it. So it's called the chameleon because, right, what's a chameleon do? It blends in. I had a professor in college who was Canadian, and he always, Canadians have a little different accents than Central or Southern Californians. And I would find myself, not necessarily with everybody that I talked to, but with this particular professor, I'd find myself changing my, how I talked, and I'd add into my sentences and whatnot, talking when I talked with him and his wife, because, the idea is this chameleon effect. We just have this natural tendency to adjust and unconsciously mimic their expressions, their postures, their voice. From like an evolutionary standpoint, this kind of helps us feel what they're feeling. So it's kind of one of those empathy type things. And so by us mimicking others, it helps us kind of put ourselves in their shoes. And remember, we talk about this social, how we're a social being, we're social animals, we want to be with others. Like Maslow talked about in his hierarchy of needs, right? And this is one of those reasons why. More specifically then is social, let's see, my eraser thing's not as cool as the other one. Normative social influence and informational social influence. So there's two types of social influence. Normative is when we, some sort of rules of behavior. You change a rule of behavior, and you match that with the group. So for instance, if everybody is clapping at a concert, you feel kind of the need to clap. Have you ever, maybe you've been to like a performance where everybody's starting to give a standing ovation, and you feel like, man, I'm going to feel really awkward if I stay sitting down during this, and so you stand up with them. Or maybe everybody's using their spoon a certain way. That would be normative social influence, and you use it the same way, okay? I'm going to give you a couple of big examples of this in a moment. And then there's informational social influence. And this is informational social influence. I'm going to write this up here. This is opinions about reality. So this is more, normative is more your behavior. Informational is more of your thoughts and the way of thinking, okay? So this right here is more informational. So when we accept other opinions about what reality is, and this kind of changes depending on, who's around us, whether we think the persons around us are smart or not, we'll conform to this. Couple of things. Give you a couple examples here. Let's see if I can erase all this. Jeez Louise. So an example of normative social influence would be, if you've seen the show Candid Camera, or maybe with Ashton Kutcher Punk'd, where there's a hidden camera. So Candid Camera, back in, I want to say the 50s, did a thing where they had everybody go into an elevator. They had this hidden camera in the elevator, and everybody in the elevator, they were all Confederate. They were all in on this little prank. They were facing the opposite direction. So, you usually face in an elevator towards the door, so when the door opens, you're ready to go. Well, everybody in this elevator was facing towards the back. And you'd watch these people enter the elevator, and these people would look around, they have this perplexed look on their face, and then this, this feeling that they just need to fit in, right? This normative social influence would kick in, and you see these people just turn around and face towards the back, even though it's completely weird. And then they even went even further, and they'd face towards the back, and then they turn to the side, everybody all at once, and then you'd watch these people inside, these people who have no idea what's going on. You watch them face the back when people were facing the back, then turn to the side when people were turning to the side, and it was a real interesting psychological study. Really, it was to make people laugh. It was a television show. It was a real psychological study to see that. Another for informational social influence is Arthur Ashe's Conformity study, Conformity, and he did things with lines. All right, so he took people into a room, and he showed them. Jeez Louise, this takes a long time. He showed them 3 lines, so it basically might look like this, and you could see, right? They say which one's longer, right? A, B, or C. Right, well, which one's long? It's obviously C. And so there'd be 3 people in the room, and the 3 people, 2 of them were Confederates, so 2 of them were in on it, and they would say, everybody might say B, right? So obviously C is longer, but the first person would say B. The second person would say B. The third person, would look really perplexed and like, what the heck's going on? What, are these people crazy? Am I crazy? And, right off the bat, they might say C. They go, okay, it's C. I think these guys are just wrong. And they'd say C. Then they do the next one. And it'd be very similar type thing. So it might be like this, this, and this, right? So you could still tell which one's longer. But it's fairly obvious. It's not like super close where you have to get a ruler out. You could still tell which one's longer. And again, so it'd be A, B, C. And again, people would go, the first guy would go A, second guy would go A, and then almost as quickly as the second one, the third guy would like look around, perplexed, and kind of have this look of consternation on his face, and then he'd also say A, because he wants to fit in, and so he'd do this informational social influence to conform with the group, and he said, I must be the crazy one because these people keep picking this other one, and so they would fall into that trap. So that's Arthur Ashe's Conformity study with the lines. Last thing I want to talk is Milgram's study on obedience. This is a classic study that was done. Stanley Milgram did this right after the Holocaust. He was actually a Jewish American, and he wanted to figure out why did normal German people commit such atrocious acts? How could this be? Now, all the German people couldn't possibly be these evil, random people. They're normal people just like you and I, but yet the Holocaust happened. How did it happen? How did these people, live with themselves for killing? Because we've seen throughout history that people have a tough time killing others. It's not an easy thing to do. So what they did is it's pretty ingenious. They put a guy in a room, right, and they showed him this box, and there's these different levers on the box, okay. And he said, "You're going to be in this study, and we're going to flip a coin, and one of you is going to be the teacher, one of you is going to be the learner." And it always turned out, the Confederate was always the learner, and the person who was the participant in the study was always the teacher. And so the teacher would say, okay, we're going to try to match some words together. If they get it wrong, you're going to have to shock them. You're going to start down here at the lowest, and you're going to work your way up as the study goes on. And after you got, to about right here, after like the 4th or 5th switch, the people, that we're getting to some high voltage here. And right here, there's even a warning label, on the very last one that says, that had a warning, like, warning, extreme harm can happen if you press this. Harmful. And so what would happen is they would ask the people, okay, you need to shock them. They'd get it wrong on purpose. They'd shock them. So they'd shock them. Usually everybody would shock right at the beginning, almost 100% compliance. They'd ask them again. They'd shock them. By the third time, people, the research or the Confederate was, starting to make these audible, like, ow, oh, making these noises about what was happening. And as it went on, the incidents were going down, and people were getting more and more uncomfortable. They could see, that they were getting more uncomfortable. And, as they were getting here, people were going, ow, and making these loud noises. And, a little ways, people were even asking to stop. Please stop. I don't want to be a part of this study. Don't shock me. And all the people who were there were asked to do is, you have to do this. You must continue. You can't stop. And they were just told that there's nothing else. You must continue. The project must go on. So please press the button. And what's crazy is, and when you got here, people were screaming and crying out in pain. Please stop. And they were begging not to get shocked. And what's crazy is up to 63, excuse me, percent of in the original study went all the way to the end. 63% of just normal people went all the way to the end. Actually, this was all men. The original study was all men. Went all the way to the end. And then they did later studies with women, and women had similar percentages as well. So women didn't get away from this. And they went just because they were told to, right? They were in a social situation where they were told to. And it was fascinating, and it helped explain how these people in Germany were able to commit these atrocities, because a lot of the reason was that they were just following orders. And why did the people explain, after they were debriefed at the end of this Milgram's obedience study, why they did what they did? And they were just following orders. And so, showed how powerful this influence could be. Some things that affected whether the person went all the way or not. They did variations of this study a lot. The person giving the orders was very close. The incidence was going up. So if someone's standing right next to you, you're more likely to do what they ask you to do. If they were wearing like a lab coat that had like Princeton or Yale on the lab coat, they're more likely to do what you want to do, because we perceive these people with prestige to know what they're doing. When they took the lab coat off or didn't, people's incidence went down actually. The farther the person was away, so if you couldn't see the person that you were shocking, even though you could hear them well, if you couldn't see them or they were far away, you were more likely to shock them. So people that were close, that you could see, you were less likely to do harm. And then if there's no role models for defiance, if you didn't see somebody not do it, it was harder for you to stop as well. Right? This is kind of why, sometimes in class, if I ask you to raise your hand, if you agree with this, or who thinks this is the correct answer, and everybody kind of looks at each other. Nobody wants to be the first person to raise your hand. But, once 2 or 3 people have their hands raised, then it's a lot easier for everybody else in the class to raise their hand because they're not alone. So that's the same idea with this obedience study. Milgram at the end said, the most fundamental lesson of our study is that ordinary people, dimly doing their jobs and without any particular hostility on their part, can become agents in a terrible destructive process. So his study was a powerful demonstration of how social influences can influence people's behavior and make good people do bad things. And we talked in part 1 about the fundamental attribution error, right? And it was very easy for countries that weren't German to say the Germans were all horrible people, but right, the power of the situation is much more powerful than we give them credit for. Thanks.